Good morning. It is a good morning. I wish it were sunnier. The nice weather was really making me happy, and then it got cold and rainy again. But during that night, I think it was during the nice weather, you had a chance to go out and cover some of our friends protesting a pharma front group. And I know we wanted to talk basically about the evil and malfeasance of Big Pharma today. My favorite thing to talk about. But Jocelyn, why don't you tell me about, I love the footage, but tell me about the sort of action and what happened and what you, even you who was very informed about how bad they are. I think it was even eye-opening to you to see just how bad they are.
It was. So for those who don't know, and that included me up until a very short time ago, there's a drug called Aduhelm. Is that how you pronounce it?
Aduhelm.
Aduhelm, released by Biogen to cure Alzheimer's. Now,
to treat Alzheimer's.
Right. So for those who don't know, Alzheimer's is an incredibly scary diagnosis that there is no cure for, and there's not much you can do to assuage the symptoms and for patients in later life. And this drug was developed with a lot of money. Billions went into developing it, and they were all poised to make a huge profit margin. The FDA approved it despite serious misgivings from the clinical and medical community about its side effects, which included things like brain swelling and other side effects that are, if anything, worse than the disease itself. And then, the government stopped it, and Medicare said, no, we're not gonna push a horrible drug on the American public. So the doctors and activists that farmed out went to an event hosted by Big Pharma, where they were like, get the government to do the right thing and push this poisonous drug on the American people, despite serious medical research that it's actually potentially lethal. And it was really eye-opening to me. We talked to some of these Big Pharma types. It was really eye-opening to me to be like, wow, there are people who really do not care. And they're not disembodied Disney villains. They're normal people in suits who are getting up in these activists' faces like, well, there's disagreement about whether or not this drug is effective. There's actually not. The side effects are pretty well documented. The disagreement is whether or not Big Pharma should have the power to put people at risk for profit. That's where the disagreement actually is.
Yeah. I'm going to go a little deeper on your explanation on the process, because I don't think people fully appreciate. So the Aduhelm doesn't work. That's the thing. So it doesn't work. It shows no clinical benefit for people with Alzheimer's. Not only does it not work, but it actually has significant side effects that are up to and including death. So you have a drug that doesn't work with massive safety concerns. And so literally every single scientific body within the FDA, there are outside groups of doctors and researchers that the FDA relies upon to give it their expert opinion before making an approval. And all of them said no. They said, do not approve Aduhelm. And then actually, people should read it. New York Times stole the scoop, and so you can read it in the New York Times, but it was Stat News who first actually recovered it. Stat News is a Boston Globe industry, pharma industry newspaper, and it's behind a paywall. So you can read it on New York Times, called How Aduhelm, an Unproven Alzheimer's Drug, Got Approved. And you should read it. because you should be really scared at how bad this corruption was. So we've seen it before with OxyContin. And if anyone hasn't seen the show on Hulu, Dope Sick, starring Michael Keaton, you really should. But the corruption of the FDA is a very scary place to be. And that's what we're dealing with. So Aduhelm literally had paid Aduhelm employees within FDA, working with FDA, who are supposed to be saying whether this drug is safe and has clinical benefit or not. And remember, the drug is not safe, nor does it have clinical benefit. And yet the FDA worked with the company hand in hand to guide this thing through an approval, which is disastrous because the FDA, our FDA, is supposed to have quality. Their stringency is supposed to be so high that in fact there are, the idea of a bad drug getting through, it should be less than a good drug getting blocked. But that has reversed. And a lot of that is because the pharma, you'll hear Republicans and everything be like, oh, well, we need to speed up FDA approval and we need to fast track things. And I can actually name names. Janet Woodcock is the shill, the industry shill. She signed off on OxyContin, the single greatest failure of the FDA in its entire lifespan or existence, I mean. She signed off on that. And what does that mean? She approved giving heroin pressed into a pill. This is just medical heroin. There's nothing different. And she approved a special black box. It wasn't a black box, a special labeling that said that this heroin was less addictive. And who wrote that? The company wrote that. And on the basis of that corruption, the entire overdose epidemic that you're seeing right now, you can put right on top of that. That's the government bureaucrat who unleashed the carnage of the overdose epidemic in this country, Janet Woodcock, who was the acting director of FDA. She signed off on Aduhelm as well. So not only did she fail, the biggest failure I've ever seen, that anyone has ever seen, she then didn't learn anything. And again, just worked with industry. And it's a mindset, Jocelyn, and I know you know this, but it's a mindset within FDA. And they literally are like, well, why would the companies not, why would the companies be lying to us? And you're like, for money. Are you that stupid? But the answer is they're not. And the key on all things pharma, and when you see this corruption, is you look at where do these bureaucrats go after they sell out the public health to these pharmaceutical corporations? And the answer is to those pharmaceutical corporations. It's a really, really cheap con from these companies, right? I mean, they just have to go to a middle manager deep within the FDA who's probably getting underpaid, undervalued, ground down. And they're like, look, all you got to do is shuffle through this approval. We'll give you all the slides, everything that you need. We'll do your job for you. We'll give you the answers to the outside experts. And then with Aduhelm, at the end of it, like even if everything's weighted against it, we'll go to the boss and put the pressure on that's going to get this across the finish line. And then you can come over and make $1 million a year at basically a no-show job, because your job is done once you've given them the approval. So what happens with the FDA approval is now the FDA approved this drug that does not work and is very dangerous for everybody who has an Alzheimer's diagnosis. So even in the studies where it did not work, they were never looking at it in the population of everybody who has an Alzheimer's diagnosis, because that's a huge population. They were only testing it in very severe cases of Alzheimer's. And so the magnitude of the approval, and this is not hyperbole, was big enough that it would have destroyed Medicare. So once it's approved that way, Medicare, there's one check, and that's what we're going to talk about with the action, Jocelyn. But CMS, who runs Medicare, they look at the approval, and this is extraordinarily rare that they would go against the FDA. It's only in this case of clear corruption that they have. But if Medicare were to cover it for everybody, Medicare can't afford that. And so what happens is everyone's premiums skyrocketed. And I think, we've talked about that on the show. So in the middle of all of the pandemic and the inflation and the price gouging by corporations, also everyone's Medicare is going to skyrocket because of one company's greed. So what was really great, but we were lucky. And so that's why I want to be a little more bleak than you on this one, Jocelyn, because we were lucky. We were lucky that we had some champions like Bernie Sanders and others. We were lucky that we were there, and we have these friends in the movement who are based on science and public health, because it's difficult to do this. We were saying, don't approve this drug. And people with Alzheimer's, or the families of people with Alzheimer's who might not know how dangerous the drug is, they're thinking that maybe this is the miracle cure. Maybe this is going to be the difference for them of, a very sad life where, a brain is just stopping working. And loved ones don't recognize you. And it's really hard, and everyone wants hope. That's what Biogen was hoping to sell, was just hope. The CMS decision, they said no. They said, we're not going to cover this. We're not going to actually cover Aduhelm except in extraordinarily narrow circumstances where the doctor has shown that it is that weighed against everything else, it makes sense. Premiums are going to come down because of that. And that is where this AstroTurf organization actually paid protesters they always call us lefties paid protesters, but they literally just pay people. And Jocelyn, you were there, so I don't want to overdo it, but this was supposed to be a protest at CMS for people and families affected by Alzheimer's. And what we were asked from our friends in Farmed Out at Georgetown was a counter protest by doctors and researchers who are saying, this is BS. This drug kills people. It has the potential to kill people and does not provide clinical benefit. And on the other side of them were what, Jocelyn? Lobbyists?
Lobbyists and lawyers. My favorite moment. I mean, obviously, it's always wonderful to hear from physicians and public health officials who are taking time out of their incredibly busy lives protecting the American public to get involved in this sort of thing, because they know how urgent it is. But we were so, Will and I are there, and we're talking with these physicians and hearing about their research. And then this guy comes up to us and he's yelling at these incredibly sweet, kind, genuine doctors. And finally, I'm just sir, are you a healthcare official in any way? Are you a researcher? Are you a doctor? He's oh no, I'm a lawyer. I was okay, so who paid you to be here? Are you just here out of the goodness of your heart? He's well, yes, I work for, I work for this organization. I was okay, so you're paid to be here and argue with doctors about their desire to not give people drugs that will potentially kill them. And he was are you calling me corrupt? And yes.
I think you did call him corrupt, yeah.
Yes, I am calling you corrupt. I apologize if that was subtle. It is not a subtle thing at all. And it was just like, I mean, I think what really infuriates me about this is that just the audacity, the smugness, the complete lizard-like glee he came in harassing doctors, researchers, nurses, people who care about the American public, people who are there because they do not want to see their patients and community members at risk. And is this smarmy, overpaid lobbyist pharma guy, zero guilt, zero anxiety. Although he didn't seem to like me very much, which I take as a compliment. But, I mean, he said, he got like very upset. I have family members with Alzheimer's. Well, then you should feel very bad about being here. He didn't like that either, but it's true.
This is one of the most, it's the most powerful and difficult tactic that pharma takes, which is the use of patient advocacy groups. So because it's hard, man, I've been there. Members of Congress, you're dealing with, these are impacted folks. These are folks who are, they or their kids or their family are sick. They're coming into their office. But the thing is, all of these advocacy groups, the patient advocacy groups, are funded by pharma 100%. And there's a minder. So there's always that dude. There's a lawyer that goes with the patients. And they are incredibly effective, these these AstroTurf patient advocacy organizations. And it's tough for advocates to be on the other side of them because, you do have, they'll have patient voices and it's kind of like, what, do you call me a liar? And you're like, unfortunately, yes, unfortunately. And I know you're in a difficult situation because I want to like really get to how bad this is. And I don't know if you know this or not, but in like a lot of these patient advocacy groups, the pharmaceutical corporation is paying people with the drug that they need to live or to live a quality life, like without pain or whatever. So it's literally the access to the drugs that they need that is held over them as marionette strings so that they dance to pharma's tune. And that's just disgusting. It's just horrible. And it's why an organization like Patients for Affordable Drugs, David Mitchell's organization, formed expressly to have a patient voice not funded by pharma is so important. And this is like a pharma show, Jocelyn. So we're gonna go deep on the things. And if people are bored, they can email me later. It's alawson@socialsecurityworks.org. But I've been doing this for a long time, so I have like in my head the different places, but I'd like to like explain it a little bit because a lot of the times when we're talking about pharma work, it's that they're restricting access to needed drugs, life-saving, life-improving drugs through high prices and monopolies, right? So like right now, there's supposedly a shortage of Paxlovid, the drug that actually treats COVID. There's not a shortage. There's just a company there that wants a shortage. Shortage means expensive, right? When there's not a lot of things, they can charge astronomical prices. There is no Paxlovid shortage. There is supposedly a shortage of one of the reagents that to make it. But you know how you get rid of shortages? You get rid of the company. You don't let one company have that monopoly that they can create a choke point through prices. We talk about that often because, and this is why I want to talk about this. I am a very pro pharmaceutical person. I am a very pro science and public health. What we can do with science is literally miraculous. If you, and I don't remember whose quote I'm stealing, but like if you were to show someone from even the early 1800s, right? Like the mid 1800s when they were like, it's probably ghosts. Here's some cocaine, right? I mean, like that was the extent of a lot of stuff. They're like, we're just going to saw your limb off. And like, we barely discovered morphine and ether by then. Right? Like, antibiotics didn't come out until after World War I. Think of a whole world war fought without any antibiotics, things that we consider, right? Like, we consider these things like very normal. It's miraculous what we've been able to do. Vaccines are just miraculous. So I'm very pro pharma driven by science. And that's why we spend so much time crushing these monopolies. But there's another angle to the work, and that's what we're talking about today, Jocelyn. When there is so much money in the system, when we're talking hundreds of billions of dollars, trillions of dollars over the last decade, it also means there's an incentive to push poison. There's an incentive to not follow the science if you have a molecule and you think you can put some marketing on it that would allow you to just dump it down some people's throats with either no clinical significance. That one's really common. So like, especially taking an old drug and just adding not an inert molecule to it. So it's literally the old drug again, but just calling it a new name. And then this is what they love doing. So the old drug is off patent. It costs $5. The new drug is on patent. It costs $1,000. And then they stop producing the old drug. And they pay other companies, or they buy companies that would try to produce that. We've seen this time and again. This is Oxycontin, a less well-known one, but that we fight on. So our people know about it is Risperdal. And I think we've had Steve Scheller on our show, right? Yeah. Yes. So Risperdal, just killing seniors. It was an antipsychotic, but it didn't work. It didn't have any clinical benefit with the antipsychotic effects, but it did dope people up. So its side effect was that it made people very lethargic, right, and more malleable. So they marketed it to institutions to make institutionalized people easier to deal with. And with institutionalized children, so this is children with autism and other issues that would have them be institutionalized. Sometimes the people, the nurses or whatever, they'd want to drug up a child to make them more easy to take care of. With seniors, it was a lot of times to get them to go to sleep, which they often never woke up from. And we have no reliable data about how many people they killed with this drug, because when a senior in an institution dies, that is not very much of note. And it's only decades later that Steve Scheller, who's an amazing trial lawyer, a friend of ours and of the show, he sued them, and he has all the paperwork where they knew it. They knew that it was poison. They knew that it was killing seniors. They knew that it was harming children, but they didn't care. They did not care. Because they knew, this is the like best part of them is they knew they would get caught. They actually mathematically work it out. They're like, okay, well, we'll get caught probably 25 years from now. And by that time we'll have sold this much, and then we'll get fined this much. And it's just the cost of doing business. That's what we were up against with Aduhelm. It was another Risperdal. It was another Oxycontin. It was another drug that this company Biogen had staked all of it was an all-in proposition for them. They'd stake their entire future on it. And so they would do everything within their power to corrupt the system, to break the system, to allow them to profit off of this molecule, because without it, the company's gone. And that's what they're fighting right now. It's a zombie fight. And so we're not done with this fight. And we have to have eternal vigilance, which is quite exhausting because we don't have a profit incentive on our side, right? It's just public health and science standing in the way of $1 billion corporation that will cease to exist if they don't get to dump this poison down people's throats. That are the two sides that you were covering, right? Like you have doctors and researchers standing on the side of public health and science. There was no benefit to them being there. And then on the other side, you had these assholes who were paid to be there, knowing what they were doing. So like, no, we should never give them the benefit of the doubt. Like, oh, well, they just don't know. They know. They know what they're doing. They're trying to dump poison down people's gullets.
Well, and I think, this brings us to a philosophical moment in today's show. I want to bring up the conversation we were having yesterday morning. I think it's really unfortunate that the best of human nature is we like to think things just work out. We like to think, oh, these are people that are very successful in shiny suits, and clearly they have doctors on their team. Clearly they're doing everything they need to be doing. And it's just not true. I mean, yes, obviously Big Pharma has tons of doctors they hire, but they're not hired in good faith. They're not hired to serve the American public. And this belief in the inertia of the best of human nature, it messes us up a lot, because the reality is if every single person in this country were as scared as they should be of the American healthcare system, we'd all be out organizing to the best of our capacity. Like, obviously, if people have multiple jobs and kids. But, the one thing we have and will always have over these people is the sheer numbers of us that are not paid off by Big Pharma. Because most people are not multimillionaire lobbyists or, administrators. Will was bringing that up a lot earlier in the week, and I think that's a very good point. But
yeah, the difficulty is, and we've talked about this a lot on this show, is I don't have a name for it. And I don't know if I stole it from someone. I've been saying it for so long. So if there is someone I should cite and they have a name, but like the decency paradox or something, right? The vast majority of people are decent. It's just true. Vast majority. It's actually a minority, a very small minority of whatever. I'd use a swear word in real life, like a really vicious one. But they're sociopath, they're evil, they're whatever. But you don't need a ton of evil to actually corrupt a whole system because of this decency paradox, because the vast majority of people can't actually put themselves into the shoes or the brains of someone who would say, kill old people and hurt children for profit. And so because of that, their brain sort of rebels. Most people are like, nah, I don't think that's happening, right? And it really especially when the other side can trot out these really, pharma reps are generally like they're frat boys and sorority women, and they're like really personable. They're right that pharma knows what they're selling. It's this friendly face. And it's hard. People are like, I don't think that person's killing people for money. And you're like, they're killing people for money. That's why I always keep telling people to watch Dope Sick with Michael Keaton in it, because like they do a really good job of also explaining how that works, how the pharma reps that they send out there are the number one like advertising that they have is actually this army of people who are selling the drug, which is not how science works, right? I mean, like that is not how a doctor should actually know to prescribe this or that. It should not be influenced by a well-dressed pharmaceutical representative who goes into the doctor's office, gives away free samples, invites the doctors to all sorts of things, and nurses and other providers to all sorts of things, to lunches. When I worked in HIV clinics, I took on the pharma reps, but I learned that I had to do it really, it was very nuanced, because like if I tried to take the free lunches away, the people in the clinic would have killed me. They would have literally cut my head off because it's just, you're talking about not high wage workers And then all of a sudden, they've got a much better lunch than they would have otherwise. And all you have to do is watch actual scientific slides. The difficulty is if you're trying to get information from the slides, you have to remember that this is not all of the information out there. This is good science, but they can withhold science. That's a key corruption in our system. Science that does not show what they want, they can memory hole it. They don't have to show it. We should absolutely outlaw that. All the data on things should be publicly available. All the clinical trials should be publicly available. It would make like way more sense. So anyways, I couldn't take away the lunches. And so because these reps had the ability to get in there. And I think I've told you about my road to Damascus moment where I actually sort of went on tilt. I wasn't on the wrong side, so it's not a road to Damascus moment. It's just a very angry moment of mine. And it was over a self-stirring coffee mug. So I had clients who were harmed, who had died, and my job was basically filling out the paperwork on it. And just reams of paperwork to get the payer to pay for this drug or that drug, or right. And then when people died or we lost them because our clients were oftentimes unhoused and had mental health issues. And, so they would disappear because we couldn't get them to regularly. It was very difficult to keep them on their psych meds, for example, and things of that nature. The system was just set up for failure. I mean, it was so obvious to me. It's why I'm here, to come here and try to change it to a system that's not set up for failure. But it was this self-stirring coffee mug. She handed it to me, and she's like, look, it's got a button on the top, and you push that, and there was a thing on the bottom, and it spun so that you didn't have to use a spoon, right? And it said the name of the drug on the coffee cup, and she was so nice and so happy, and she thought I was going to be so happy with it, and I was filling out this depressing paperwork, and I was like, it'd be better use of your money than a self-stirring coffee mug, just making sure that your drugs were available to the people who needed them. And the office was sort of then quiet.
Good for you.
And people sort of looked over their cubicle like, what's going on over there? And she was like, it's self-stirring. And I'm like, okay. And then I worked with people to ban tchotchkes. So not the food, because I would have been murdered, but the tchotchkes I banned. And I actually, this is with a bunch of people, we told the pharma reps that they could only bring in things that were useful to our clients, to the patients of the clinic. So socks, toothbrushes, travel kits that included toothbrushes and toothpaste and shampoo and stuff. And man, did that piss off these pharma reps because we were obviously the only one who did that. So they'd have to like go to Walgreens and buy a bunch of baby size bottles of soap. And they just every time just glaring at me and, drinking out of their self-stirring coffee mugs. But it's an industry, Jocelyn. That's the point. It's an industry, and it's in every nook and cranny of our system. So like this, where I was in Chicago, this is like the most hardcore, like however you want to think about it. This is the most not corporate healthcare provider. The service, it's like outreach clinic. The service was homeless folks, people with mental health issues, active substance users, victims of state-sponsored torture, refugees, right? Like that was the client population. So that the providers are like, this is where somebody handed me Paul Farmer's book on like day one, right? Like this is those people driven by justice. And that's where pharma's got their hooks deep into there as well, right? Like you can't escape them. And that's why the system, it can't be reformed. It's too corrupting. There's too much money. So I'll say, so what do we do about it, Alex? The key is, if we removed the money, if we removed the ability to make trillions of dollars, the whole science would actually start following public health, right? If there wasn't a financial incentive to pour poison down people's throats, it wouldn't happen. If there wasn't a financial incentive to create these non-important tweaks on existing medication, they wouldn't do that. That's not where the research would be invested. We would be investing in research driven by public health need: malaria, tuberculosis, HIV, COVID, the next pandemic. These would be the places that we are looking. There'd be more than enough still for erectile dysfunction and male pattern baldness and all the things that they are spending, billions of dollars, the corporations trying to address. But the science, the research entities, and all of the public health infrastructure that they have corrupted would be aimed at the greatest public health need. So it's the two parts of the pharma fight that I talked about, and I'll try to bring it around if anyone could follow me up till now, are actually one fight. As soon as we reduce that profit making power of monopolies, it also will reduce the incentive for Oxycontin, Risperdal, Vioxx, right? I mean, with a quick Google, I can find you 15 drugs that have been poured down the mouths of the American people that have ended up being not effective and leading to harm. And you remove the profit from that, and there's no reason that any company would do that. They couldn't protect themselves, right? They would be sued out of existence. Right now, they're sued in, I think, remember, Steve Scheller won $7 billion judgment. Pretty sure somewhere right around there, but billion. And even that, and it got whittled down immediately, right? Like that never, the big number that's in the press is never what they end up paying. But even that number was less than they made on the drug. So they're going to end up paying like 70 million or something, which seems like a lot of money. But when you're talking pharma size, it's not a lot of money.
Well, and I mean, I think you like the profit incentive. So I think there's this idea that, you can discuss these problems without talking about how these systems work, as if, I mean, my least favorite thing about American culture is this desire to have personal villains and personal superheroes, which, like, by all means, it makes great fiction and movies. But the reality is most people are responding to the incentive structures of their surroundings. So if you are, as you said, Alex, a shiny, happy, attractive frat boy, and there's an industry where you can make large amounts of money with relatively little labor, I mean, as much as I would love to villainize that person, and I totally will in my off time, the reality is, like, maybe that's not a system that's going to create good things. Maybe the fact that we have more medical, technological, and scientific sophistication in this country than we know what to do with, and instead of using it to end disease, to end human suffering, to make life better and easier for the billions of people that populate this planet, instead, we have allowed a very small number of people to make egregious financial profits off of that. And the funny thing is, it's like, if you want to get really spiritual with it, that's not really good for those people either. Like, it has to be very difficult. I think a lot about that pharma lobbyist I made friends with at this protest. Like, I mean, I think I was actually upsetting him. And that's where it gets interesting because, like you said, Alex, most people are decent. Most people do want to feel like the work they spend their life on meant something, that they helped people, that they're a person their kids can be proud of. And it's a really unfortunate thing. Like, again, Will and I were having this conversation on the air a couple days ago. It's a really unfortunate thing that we live in a country where the incentive structure is bifurcated. It's like, okay, you can be a good and just person, or you can make millions of dollars. Oh, by the way, welcome to America. We have confused the ability to make millions of dollars with being a moral person. It's really easy to see how a lot of other people who might have actually turned into very decent people become sociopaths and villains and pharma bros.
or cogs in a wheel of a system that is evil.
Yeah.
And, like, where are certain people going to go? If like these are the companies that are doing XYZ, and actually what actually happens is those companies just buy the companies. So the big pharma corporations just let smaller companies do research, and probably everyone in there is like, yes, we're going to solve this problem that's been plaguing humanity. And then they're hoovered up by a corporation who buys the patent as well, and the IP, and then is like, oh yeah, well, you solved it, but we're not going to solve it because that's not profitable. And I wish people would hear this one thing, because it's really amazing to me. And again, it's just like we allow it. But we can end HIV in one generation. So it's just one cohort of existence, and HIV is gone, because we have this drug that's a pre-exposure prophylaxis called PrEP. And with PrEP, you can basically stop an HIV infection even if a person is exposed to HIV. And PrEP was developed entirely with taxpayer dollars. Like we, like all of the things, we paid for it.
Right.
What the pharmaceutical corporations call research and development is not R&D; it's marketing. And all of the basic science is ours, and all the way through. Sometimes it's the entire cycle from early clinical all the way to late stage clinical trials, all paid for by the taxpayers. But the company is actually holding on to PrEP at a price point where they can maximize profits and not end HIV. But this is the part that blows my mind, Jocelyn. It doesn't blow my mind. It just makes me redouble my efforts to burn it down. They'd be profitable, massively profitable, if they ended HIV. Just a bit less profitable than if they don't end HIV. And that occurs over and over and over again. We have the cure for hepatitis C. These companies would make oodles of money if we ended hepatitis C. We could cure every single person in this country and around the world of hepatitis C if we didn't allow this company to charge the price where they can make the most money. We're not saying a price where they don't make money. That's what boggles my mind. People think of it as this like pitched battle where it's like, oh, well, the whole system no, these companies will still exist. No, these companies will still make massive profits. Even if we take their patents away and we actually allow generic competition, which is the best thing to do, the companies will still make money. People will still buy the branded or their generic version. What we have right now is the opposite. If you're like a capitalist, not you, Jocelyn, but if you are a capitalist, this is the least capitalist system that you can imagine. It's government granted monopolies that do not allow any competition. So like we're on this, the libertarian bros should definitely be with us. We're attacked in the Washington Times this morning. So the libertarian bros are not with us because libertarians are just 12-year-olds who never grew up. And just like very childish. But that's the part that it's why you can't ever look at this system and then think that there's some sort of charity or voluntary action that the industry could take where they would be better, right? Like the industry is written into its bones evil. The system is evil. It will not self-regulate. We have every iota of evidence that we need that it's actually just getting worse, right? Like Moderna just created, it's a brand new company, and they took our vaccine that we paid for 100%, the taxpayers paid for 100% of the Moderna vaccine. They get to call it the Moderna vaccine. Should be called the U.S. taxpayer vaccine or the Dolly Parton vaccine. They are going to ramp down production right now of their stuff. And they just openly say it because they're like, oh, yeah, our job isn't to provide vaccination to the world. Our job is to make money, which I'm also like, okay with. It's like, okay, well, that's your job then. Well, my job is to vaccinate the world. And so we're at odds. And I'm going to take your patent away from you and vaccinate the world because you admit that you can't do that, that the business does not have it within their ability to follow the public health. And so the government needs to step in as a representative of the people to actually do this. And we've talked long about the legislative tack on this. We now have the Make Meds Affordable campaign going, which is makemedsaffordable.org. We're working with Senator Elizabeth Warren and other champions in the House, Pramila Jayapal, and others. And these are all executive actions that President Biden can take right now to lower drug prices. And I'll toss it back to you with my most optimistic take, because the Aduhelm fight was great. And that was good. And Becerra did well. And the administration did well. The fight that I am most optimistic about right now is Paxlovid. It's COVID. Like the dissonance between, we can't do anything about the shortage, and the facts that with just a little bit of effort that we could actually have treatment available for anybody who's infected with COVID. So we increase vaccinations around the world. And then if people do get sick, we have the ability to treat them. That's where I think we have our best case and the best political saliency to break the patent, use executive action, and make sure that everyone who needs COVID treatment has access to it.
I love that you bring up the Defense Production Act and executive actions, because I am personally very, very tired of hearing people with more political power than anyone in the world be like, oh, but what could we do about this problem? I don't know. It's not like I'm the president of America or something. I mean, I don't want to say that's on us. It's not the American public's fault that this is the government we have, but it is, important for us to remember that these people absolutely have the problem to fix these issues. There's just so much money and so much power, and it has ballooned into a state where the pharmaceutical monopolies have seemed like this impenetrable wall, but they're not. I mean, a lot of this it's pretty simple. Okay, like you're saying, Alex, if you don't want to take the government funded research that we're giving you for free and do things for the American public, you don't get government funded research anymore. Good luck replicating the medical institutions of this country on your own. I would love to see that. That would be fascinating. But this isn't a free market society. This is maybe it's like a free billionaires market society. Is that a thing? Is that what late stage capitalism means, when it's just like capitalism for billionaires? Because Senator Warren, who I don't necessarily agree with this on, but Senator Warren will point out over and over that she is a capitalist, and that the society we have doesn't reflect the competitive nature of capitalism, because it's not competitive if the only people that compete have trillions of dollars.
Yeah, I mean, you just look at the healthcare system, the so-called healthcare system. And people say it's broken, and I'm like, it's not broken. It's working really, really well. It's just not a healthcare system. It's a wealth extraction system. But that's totally true. It's not set up to provide healthcare to you. It's not provide healthcare to me. And I should add a nuance to that, because this is true. We have an amazing healthcare system, an actual healthcare system for rich people in this country. If you're rich, we have amazing healthcare in America. And I don't know if you've ever argued with a Republican about healthcare, and they're like, yeah, well, why is everyone flying in to get cancer treatments here then? And you're like, because they're rich, bro. It's because they're rich. You're not going to get it there, though. You're going to get the crappy healthcare that everyone gets, where the first thing that happens is a nurse wheels in that little calculator machine and they total up your bill and they ask for your insurance before you get anything.
Yes.
I can't remember the name of it. It's a great. It was a fun science fiction show on Netflix. I think I mentioned this before, and the books are way better. But there's a scene in it that's supposed to be like a picture of the dystopian future, and so like she goes and she needs medical care and she puts her thumb on the machine and it's like, and then he goes and puts his thumb on the machine and it's like ding, 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 because he's rich, and it's supposed to be like, oh my God, they're, rationing care based on a person's ability to pay. How dystopian. And you're like, today, that's literally what we do today. And then I always take the time to point out, because most people don't know this, if you give your card and it says Joe Schmo's crappy insurance and you hand it to them and you have a heart valve replacement and you hand it to them and they're like, Joe Schmo's, you get different care than if a person comes in and is like, platinum, You have a different standard of care based on your ability to pay. Do you know how crazy that is? Doctors have decisions made for them by bean counters in the actuarial and accounting. That's why the nurse rolls in that machine and takes your card first and foremost to decide whether you're wealthy enough to get care, or whether you should just be allowed to continue to be sick and die. And our system, what kind of people allow that system to be perpetrated upon us? And the answer is us. And like the only losers in the stuff we talk about, Jocelyn, everyone wins. Even the libertarian bro who's just like, Ayn Rand was a genius, even that person wins. The only person who loses is the 2,755 billionaires on this planet. So 2,755 versus 7 billion. It is outrageous that we allow this few number, this tiny, tiny, tiny sociopathic cohort of wealth to actually dictate the mass death and harm of billions of people across this globe. And if we can just have enough decency, enough pride in our own humanity, that we won't allow this parasitic billionaire class to actually just leech off of the body humanity, we can build a future. We can get rid of climate crisis. We can stop basically all the things that we talk about that seem so bleak and unconquerable. And it's like, oh, well, what are we going to do? And you're like, make the 2,755 losers. They lose, everyone else wins. And I will say, seizing oligarchs' wealth, Russian oligarchs' wealth, is a good start mentally to get to the place where people start realizing, like, hey, you know what? These American oligarchs also have far too much money and corrupting power. And we should probably seize their wealth as well. So I invite everyone to start rebranding these 2,755 billionaires as the global oligarchy. And we know who we're talking about then, right? Like, that's who are perpetrating all of the policies that we're talking about in order to maintain their wealth and power.
Yeah, I mean, because they are. And I think that's why, we had this discussion with Steven when he was on our show a couple of weeks ago. It's, people who are annoyed at the mainstream media's coverage of Russia have every right to be, because it's absolutely ridiculous that we look abroad and are like, wait a minute, their country is run by oligarchs who are accountable to no one. That's terrible. It's like, yeah, if only If only that reminded us of something or someone or everything. And, yes, Putin is bad. American oligarchs also are bad. Global oligarchs equals bad in general. That's my hot take for the day.
Yeah, and the I mean, Putin is absolutely evil, and like that's been clear forever. I mean, he went to the UK and put radioactive material in a dissident's underwear, so that I mean, like that kind of psychopathy is, you're like, that's not a dude that I would want to know my name, because if he knows your name, he might kill you. So that's that. And there's no equivalence that I'm saying. And there's no but. It's just, do you know where the Russian oligarchs learned their oligarching? From the American oligarchs. Do you know where Putin learned how to create the shell companies, and where the shell companies are to hide the wealth that he's extracted from the Russian people? The American oligarchs. Their corporate shell companies are in the same place. Read the Panama Papers or the Pandora Papers, or one of the massive leaks that show we have created the system that allows, we, the United States of America, have created the system that allows for a global oligarchy. If we did not allow their wealth to be hidden in really obvious ways, right? They're like, the shell companies are like, this is not Vladimir Putin's company, right? And you're like, that's all of these penthouses, these $100 million penthouses all around New York, held by these shell companies as investment. That it's dirty money. We're allowing the global blood-soaked oligarchy to actually hide their money in America. We have to completely reform that system, and it's also not that hard. We've done it before. The cocaine cowboys from Colombia Miami was basically built with their dirty money. They just needed a place to launder their money, and it was Miami. And there was just a change. You just like policy change, like no more giant bags of money brought into a bank and be like, where'd you find that? Like that change was really easy. And everyone's like, oh, I guess I have to account for all my money. It's not hard to be like, real estate has to have a clear chain of title so that we know who owns what, that you can't hide behind these shell companies so that you can launder dirty money, right? Like it's just about making that choice. And those are systemic changes that we can do in our financial system that would do, right? We know how to beat Russia, Putin, but big picture. We know how to beat them big picture. Number one, get away from oil and extractive energy. It's the number one thing we can do. It removes all the power from the petrostates, right? The blood-soaked House of Saud, Putin and his KGB killers, all of them, their power comes from oil. We transition away from oil, we take their power away from them. At the same time as we're doing that, we're also transforming our financial system away from one that rewards oligarchy and billionaires and into one that actually rewards work and labor and workers. I left you 1 minute, Jocelyn, to sign out. I apologize.
I agree. I mean, I would love to disagree with you, but I don't. So thank you so much for being with us this Friday. We will see you next Friday and hopefully have more positive news to report about the government doing its job. Do not get your hopes up, though. Thank you so much.